Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to look at a story that took place in 2004 in New Jersey, USA. Brittney Gregory was born on April 1, 1988, in Brick Township and was the youngest of 5 children in her family. As a result of her parents' divorce, she was left to live with her father, but maintained a close relationship with all of her siblings, especially her sister Brianna, who was 4 years older than her. In school, Brittney proved to be an excellent student, and teachers assumed she could become a scholar. Her unusual dream, however, was to become a forensic scientist and study crime scene evidence. Brittney relished her role as the baby of the family. Her mother said she was spoiled, to be sure, but not vain or arrogant. She celebrated her 16th birthday in April by holding her mother to a promise she had made to let her get her belly button pierced. She idolized pop queen Britney Spears and had posters of her tacked up in her bedroom. She enjoyed cartoons, especially SpongeBob SquarePants, and couldn't get enough of TV shows about forensic science, the profession she wanted to pursue. She and her mother used to tune in to the same shows and then call each other to talk about them as they watched. In 2004, 16-year-old Brittney and her older sister Brianna, who was 20, lived with their father Joe Dunn and his new girlfriend, Lori Peterson, in a small house near their school. Brittney's father's house was the last one on the street and was near a wooded area. At the time, Brittney had been dating 18-year-old John Fitzgerald for almost 2 years. He was a nice guy whom Brittney's family approved of. They had a very warm relationship and were considered the perfect couple. On Sunday, July 11, 2004, Brittney's mother, Deborah, and her sister Brianna drove to the town of South Tums River, about 15 miles from Brittney's home, to visit her older brother and his wife, who had recently had a daughter. At about 8:30 p.m. that evening, Brittney called her mother on her cell phone and asked for a ride to her boyfriend John's house. The girl's voice was very upset, indicating possible trouble. Her mother explained that she was out of town and couldn't drive Brittney, but said that her sister Brianna could be there in about an hour. Brittney agreed and said she would wait for her. About 45 minutes after Brittney called, Brianna was free and decided to call her, but her sister didn't answer. Brianna thought Brittney was asleep or that someone else had taken her to John's. When Brianna returned home in the morning, she found that Brittney wasn't there, but her things, including her phone, were still there. Brianna speculated that maybe Brittney had spent the night at her boyfriend's house, but it was strange that she hadn't told anyone about it and had left her cell phone at home. It wasn't like her. Looking for answers, Brianna started calling all of Brittney's friends to see if anyone had seen her, but no one knew anything. After trying unsuccessfully to contact her sister, Brianna decided to call John. He said he last spoke to Brittney on the phone Sunday morning, and they hadn't seen or spoken to each other since. Brittney's father's girlfriend, Lori Peterson, who lived with them, said she returned home around 10 p.m. Sunday night, and Brittney wasn't there. Brianna sensed something was wrong and immediately went to the police station to report Brittney missing. At first, the police didn't take Brianna's concerns about her sister's disappearance seriously. It seemed to them that the girl had simply run away from home or was spending time with friends, but Brianna convinced the officers that she had already called all of her sister's friends and talked to her boyfriend, but none of them knew where Brittney might be. Brianna was sure her sister couldn't have run away, because she was an honor student who spent most of her time in the library. Brittney never left the house without warning, and all of her belongings, money, and phone were left at home. After Brianna convinced the police that her sister could not have run away on her own, the officers began their search. First, they went to the house where Brittney lived to inspect her room and tried to find some clues. They made sure that Brittney's purse, with her phone, ID, and makeup, was left in her room. The police did not find anything suspicious in her room. They interviewed everyone who lived in the house and ruled out the possibility that anyone close to Brittney was involved in her disappearance. The police then began a search of the area around the house. They checked all the houses in the area, walked around the property, and talked to neighbors. They looked for witnesses who might have seen or heard something. The officers noted that the house was at the end of the street and that there was a wooded area across the street. None of the neighbors noticed anything suspicious, except for one woman who said she saw Brittney walking down the street toward her house late Friday night when it was already dark. This was 2 days before Brittney's disappearance, and the information seemed insignificant, but investigators paid attention to it. This information did not fit the image of a modest girl who spent most of her time in the library and did not go out without her parents' permission. What made Brittney go out so late, and was she allowed to go out at such a time? The police were anxious to find out if Brittney was truly the homebody her sister had described. Numerous police interviews with her family, neighbors, and teachers revealed that no one had anything bad to say about the girl. Everyone spoke very highly of her. While talking to the police, Brianna reported that Brittney and her boyfriend John had a strained relationship lately. The couple had been arguing a lot, and on the day of her disappearance, Brittney and John had another fight. This caused Brittney to be upset, and she wanted to visit John that evening to make up with him. The investigators decided to examine John's identity more closely. They invited him to the police station to see if he had seen Brittney the day she disappeared. John reported that his last phone call with Brittney was on Sunday morning. At that time, he was at the beach with friends, and Brittney was upset that he went there without her. They argued about it and hadn't spoken since. He also revealed that he broke up with Brittney a few days ago, but she couldn't accept it, even though she knew he was already dating another girl. John claimed that he had no plans to go out with Brittney that night and didn't know she was coming to his house. The reason for their breakup was the rumor that Brittney had kissed another guy at a party, although John didn't see it himself. Because of this, he decided to break up with her and started dating another girl. He last saw Brittney on July 10, the day before she disappeared, when she gave him a letter expressing her desire to make up. The detectives asked John for permission to look at the letter Brittney had written, and he handed it to them. In the letter, Brittney apologized for her behavior and for breaking John's heart. She also asked him to remain friends. John seemed genuinely concerned and worried that Brittney hadn't been found yet. The police had no evidence linking John to Brittney's disappearance, and after he successfully passed a lie detector test, he was taken off the list of suspects. However, John did tell detectives one important detail. He said that Brittney often came to his house through the woods behind her father's house. The story of Brittney's disappearance became more and more complicated. Detectives began to wonder if Brittney had tried to get to John's house that night, which was about a mile from her father's house through the woods. It was already dark, and she could get lost or fall somewhere along the way. The police started a search in the woods that Brittney probably passed through. She may have walked along a path that started near her house. Being in the woods at night was scary and dangerous, and the question of why a young girl was not afraid to walk through the woods in the dark was puzzling. The search in the forest lasted for 3 days, but nothing was found. When it seemed that the investigation had reached a dead end, the police were contacted by a woman who had been with her brother in a park in the same area on the night Brittney disappeared. It was quiet, deserted, and there were no cars, but a Chevrolet pickup truck with distinctive wheels drove by. The woman noticed this car and even remembered its license plate. After a thorough check, investigators found that the car was registered to 23-year-old Anthony Geiger. To determine his connection to Brittney's disappearance, police began investigating Anthony's past and found out that he was the ex-boyfriend of Bobby Jo, Brittney's sister. Bobby Jo told detectives they broke up about a month ago because Anthony was overly jealous and paid too much attention to Brittney. She also suspected that Anthony, 23, had feelings for her younger sister, Brittney, and ended the relationship with him completely. Brittney's friends remembered that Anthony always looked at her strangely and tried to flirt with her. The last time they met was at lunch, where Anthony tried to flirt with Brittney again. Detectives began to suspect Anthony of kidnapping Brittney and decided to bring him in for questioning. During the interrogation, Anthony denied being in the area where Brittney lived on the evening of July 11. According to him, he wasn't there until the next day, July 12, when the police had already started searching for the girl. He admitted being on good terms with her and often saw her at parties, but claimed they were just friends and that he didn't flirt with her. Anthony also stated that he understood Brittney was too young for him and that he only cared for her as a friend. According to Anthony's testimony, he spent the evening of July 11 at home with his new girlfriend. Although his girlfriend confirmed his alibi, investigators still considered him a suspect because his house was close to where Brittney lived. Investigators revisited a letter Brittney had written to John and noticed disturbing signs that she might have been saying goodbye to her loved one. They began to fear that Brittney might be hurting herself after breaking up with her boyfriend. However, Brittney's parents rejected this theory, believing their daughter was smart and determined and wouldn't give up her grand plans because of a breakup. They believed Brittney was too in love with life. After the investigation stalled again, the police reached out to the public through the media to find possible witnesses. Police officers from other areas joined the investigation to assist. Brittney's parents also took an active part in the search, going door to door in the neighborhood, but it didn't lead to any new information. The police decided to return to Brittney's house. They wondered if she had been kidnapped right from the house. During a thorough search, they found something important in Brittney's room, her personal diary, which contained a handwritten letter. The contents of this letter provided important insights into her family relationships. Brittney described her life, relationships with her friends and boyfriend, schooling, and her dysfunctional family. She wrote about visiting her older brother in jail every Sunday, her mother's drug addiction, and living with her father and his girlfriends. She expressed her desire to succeed in life and not follow the path of her parents, revealing her dream of becoming a forensic scientist. After reading the letter, the police expanded the pool of suspects to include Brittney's family. Detectives discovered that a male massage parlor was operating out of the house where she lived. Lori Peterson, a friend of Brittney's father, served different men every day, providing intimate services rather than massages. Neighbors reported that suspicious people often gathered at Brittney's father's house to use illegal substances, indicating a dysfunctional home environment. The police began working to identify everyone who had been in Joe Dunn's house in the past month, which was a difficult task. A week after Brittney went missing, on July 18, the police announced the arrest of a murder suspect. Brittney's family was shocked as her body had not been found. When a picture of the suspect was shown on television, Brittney's mother, Deborah, recognized him. It was her longtime friend, 38-year-old Jack Fuller Jr., who had been close to the family for 20 years. His daughter was engaged to Brittney's brother, who was in prison. Deborah was in shock. Why had Jack been arrested and charged with murder, especially since Brittney's body had never been found? Fuller, a hardened criminal, had a long history of crimes. He had broken into cars, houses, used and sold drugs, and even threatened people with violence. He had been arrested more than a dozen times in the last 10 years and had served time in state prison for theft and parole violations. Many of his crimes went unreported because people were afraid of him. Brittney's parents believed Jack might steal, but couldn't imagine him harming their daughter. Shortly after Fuller's arrest, it became clear how the police linked him to Brittney's disappearance. A call came in at the police station from someone who had recently met Jack. Jack complained of back pain after burying a girl's body in the sandy soil. He assured the caller that the body would never be found and asked how deep it should be buried so animals wouldn't smell it. The informant wore a listening device to meet Jack Fuller again, and Jack admitted to burying the body in a remote location, though he never mentioned Brittney's name. Fuller also expressed the need to kill someone who knew too much, pointing to his friend, Tommy, who was present but didn't hear the conversation. Detectives were certain Tommy knew something important and brought him in for questioning, but he refused to cooperate, saying he didn't know anything. The detectives knew that he was lying. To prove their point, they played a recorded conversation in which Jack says he wants to kill Tommy because he knows too much. Tommy realizes that he is in danger and decides to cooperate with the police. Tommy tells them that the night Brittney disappeared, he and Jack were driving around the neighborhood smoking crack. They stopped in front of Brittney's house, and Jack decided to go inside to talk to her father about some things. When he entered the house, there was no one there but Brittney. 5 minutes later, Jack returned to the car with Brittney, and she sat in the back seat. According to Tommy, he was confused and asked what was going on. Brittney didn't answer anything. She lowered her gaze. Jack said he was about to take Tommy home. Tommy claimed that Jack drove him home, and when he got out of the car, Brittney, who was sitting in the back, also got out of the car and got into the front passenger seat. Then Jack drove off. The next day, when they met again, Jack said nothing about what had happened the day before. They stopped at a car wash where Jack gave his car a good wash inside and out. This was unusual because he had never done it before. The car wash attendant even joked about it, but Jack got angry and told him to mind his own business or risk his life. Tommy explained that when he found out about Brittney's disappearance, he realized that Jack might be involved. He asked Jack directly what he was doing with the girl. Jack became very angry at the question and said that he had taken her home, rudely asking Tommy not to ask again if he didn't want trouble. Tommy assumed that Jack had taken Brittney to the woods to rape her, because Jack had planned to use Laurie's intimate services that night, but she wasn't home. The detectives realized that Jack was their man. When they arrived to arrest him, Jack had a can of gasoline in his hands and looked like he was going to burn his car. Was he going to burn the car to destroy the evidence? Yes, it looked like he was. During the search, blood was found in the car, and forensics determined that it was Brittney's blood. After the police found out that Jack had visited a car wash after a trip with Brittney, they went there and confiscated the vacuum cleaner he had used. Criminologists found particles of sand stuck together by blood inside the vacuum cleaner. Testing left no doubt that it was Brittney's blood. Despite the available evidence, Jack would not confess to the kidnapping and murder of Brittney and refused to talk about it. Detectives interviewed all of Jack's acquaintances, and most of them were sure he was capable of murder. Many described him as a man ready for anything. Despite the fact that Jack didn't work anywhere, he always had money. During the investigation, it turned out that on the night of Brittney's disappearance, one of the patrol officers saw a car parked on the side of the road near the woods. It was Jack Fuller's car. At the time, it was not known that Brittney had disappeared. When the officer approached Jack, he said he was looking for his dog, which had run off into the woods. Given this information, the search for the body focused on the area where the officer saw Jack's car. Police officers, K-9 units, helicopters, and volunteers participated in the search, but it was unsuccessful. Investigators speculated that Brittney was desperate for someone to drive her to her boyfriend's house that night. When Jack showed up at her house, she asked him to do it. Jack agreed to take her wherever she needed to go, but instead, he took his friend Tommy home and decided to take advantage of the situation by raping and killing Brittney. But to prove it, her body had to be found. While the police were trying to interrogate Jack and get a confession, another witness came forward. A woman called the police and said that if Jack Fuller really did kill Brittney, she might know where he hid her body. This woman was a former drug addict, and Jack once held her hostage for months before she escaped. During that time, she had gotten to know Jack well and knew all his secrets, where he went, and what he did. He often went to the same places and took her with him. One day, he showed her a place near a power line and told her it was a great place to bury someone, and that no one would ever find a body there. The detectives did not believe the woman at first and began asking her questions. She reported that the site was in Lakewood and that the soil was sandy. The police immediately remembered the words of an informant who told them how Jack had complained about the difficulty of burying a body in the sandy soil. The authorities decided to conduct a search in the area the woman had pointed out. It was only 3 miles from the house where Brittney lived. After several days of searching, there were no results, but the police kept searching. Experts compared the sand from the vacuum cleaner used by Fuller at the car wash to the soil in the area and got a perfect match. More than 100 people a day combed the dense forest on the border of Monmouth and Ocean counties. Brittney's grave was finally discovered on Tuesday morning, July 27, 2004, 15 days after she was reported missing. She was found by 3 New Jersey canine officers who had brought their dogs on a weekend search to help. The young girl's naked body turned up in a hole, and a necklace with Brittney's name on it hung around her neck. The detectives knew immediately that they had finally found her. The medical examiner, who performed the autopsy, confirmed that it was Brittney Gregory's body, but he was never able to determine the exact cause of her death. The girl had been strangled and suffered head trauma. I'm not going to deny that there was trauma to her head, but that was not the cause of death, said Ocean County Executive Assistant Prosecutor Robert Gasser. The body had decomposed over 2 weeks, and the medical examiner said he couldn't rule out strangulation or suffocation. Gasser added that Brittney's body showed no obvious signs of sexual assault, but the medical examiner did not rule out the possibility of rape. Jack Fuller decided to take a plea bargain after consulting with his attorney. Brittney's family also agreed to the deal to avoid a long and arduous trial. Brittney's mother stated that she did not want the death penalty for Jack because it would be too easy for him. She wanted him to spend the rest of his life in prison, suffering and regretting what he had done. Jack said Brittney asked him to take her to her boyfriend's house, and he agreed. First, he took Tommy home, and then he was going to take Brittney to her boyfriend, but before that, he stopped on the side of the road and started smoking crack. This caused Brittney to get angry, and she started yelling at him and slapped him on the arm. This made him furious, and he started punching Brittney. He admitted to punching her in the face and head at least twice because she tried to stop him from smoking crack. After the beating, Brittney began making gasping and gurgling noises. Fuller continued to get high as blood flowed from her nose and mouth. When he finally turned his attention to her, Brittney had stopped breathing. He realized she was dead and decided to dispose of the body. However, his story was not believed because the medical examiner found evidence of strangulation on Brittney's body, which Fuller did not mention. In addition, he did not explain why he had taken off all of Brittney's clothes. The prosecution believed that the crime was sexually motivated. An Ocean County grand jury indicted Fuller for murder on February 9, 2005. Fuller later pleaded guilty on October 18, 2005, to purposely and knowingly causing serious bodily injury, resulting in death. He was sentenced to 30 years without parole on January 13, 2006.